All right, class, let's get on to our next topic. The topic is the Enlightenment. Essential question: how did the Enlightenment expand the world? So the emergence of the Enlightenment, first time in human history, they had a secular view of life, and that would be something pertaining to outside of the church. Notion that science and reason could explain life, belief in autonomy of man's intellect apart from God, deism, existence of God, was a rational explanation. God was a deistic creator, created the universe, and then he stepped back. He didn't have a hand in everybody's life. A universe governed by natural law, not personal God. Deism grew out of Newton's theories. So all of the scientists from this time just built upon each other and created a totally different outlook on life. All right, John Locke was one of the first scientists at the time. 1632 to 1704, he wrote the two treaties of the civil government. 1690, philosophical defense of the English glorious revolution. Talked about how humans are good, but they needed protection. And this was a contrast to Hobbes. Hobbes had written how everyone is sinful and bad. The purpose of the government is to protect natural rights of people, life, liberty, and property. I mean, this is very similar to our Constitution, which the writers of our Constitution in the United States took a lot from John Locke. People have the right to rebel if government doesn't protect natural rights. He wrote the essay concerning human understanding, 1690, which stressed the importance of the environment on human development. Tabula rasa, the mind born a blank slate, registered input from the senses. Education at this time is critical for human development. Undermined church view of humankind as sinful. So up until this time, the church had a huge role in people's personal lives, and this started to change the ideas of people's even personal lives pertaining to the church. Philosophers committed to the fundamental reform in society. So these philosophers made a large difference in how people viewed society and viewed their own lives. By 1775, much of Western Europe had embraced the Enlightenment, radically optimistic about how people should live and govern. So the philosophers really thought that people should just change overnight, and so should governments, and that did not happen. One of the great philosophers, Voltaire, 1694 to 1778, most influential of the Enlightened philosophers. His social criticisms inspired a call for change, setting the stage for the French Revolution. So he lived in France, right on the edge, so if they wanted to kick him out, he could just run over to Germany or Switzerland, but he did spend some times with some enlightened despots. He hated bigotry and injustice, called for religious toleration. He wrote many works, best known for Candide, and Candide is one of the books we're reading in class. Advocated enlightened despotism, influenced Frederick the Great, Catherine the Great, Joseph II of Austria, and of course Napoleon, who read quite a few of his works. Those were all enlightened despots of Eastern Europe. Now, the Baron de Montesquieu, 1689 to 1755, he was a member of the nobility in France, but hated absolutism, so really despised King Louis XIV. Wrote Spirit of the Laws, called for separation of powers into three branches, principle of checks and balances. So these are all ideas that we have in our Constitution today. No excess of power. Montesquieu's ideas had a huge impact on the U.S. Constitution in the French Revolution, 1780. And now Rousseau, 1712 to 78, had the idea of the social contract. Property was emphasized, but too much so, and not enough consideration for the people. So land oftentimes had more value than a person's life. The general will, majority should rule the nation. Man was corrupted by materialism, believed in a progressive education, learning by doing, seen as the founder of the Romantic movement. So Rousseau was one of these forward thinkers, and rightly so, to be named as like the founder of the Romantic movement. Now Diderot, 1713 to 84, wrote the Encyclopedia, which was perhaps the greatest and most representative work of the philosophers at the time. Today we think of an encyclopedia, a whole bunch of books, a lot of information. This was very similar, but it had all the writings of the philosophers at the time. It was a very large book, banned in France, and by the Pope, who put it on the index of prohibited books during his time. Now, economic theory, we had Francis Quesnay, 1694 to 1774, leader of the physiocrats. He opposed mercantilism policies, thought there needed to be reform existing in the agrarian system through the laissez-faire. So he was the beginning of the thought process to capitalism. The huge writer of that was Adam Smith, 1727 to 90. He wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, which was the Bible of capitalism. Economy governed by laws of supply and demand, free market competition goods for high quality, low cost, no government regulation. So he was the beginner of capitalism that would then flourish throughout England during the agricultural revolution and then into the industrial age. Now, women during the Enlightenment, women played a major role in the salon movement. Women opened salons to promote the Enlightenment, places to discuss major issues of the day. The philosophers favored increasing rights and education for women. So the women at this time would open up a shop on the corner, you know, in downtown Paris or wherever, and not only women would go in there, but of course men, these philosophers, and discuss the times, and they would get, you know, quite a bit out of it. Later in the Enlightenment, we have David Hume. He undermined the Enlightenment with an emphasis on reason. Immanuel Kant, from 24 to 1804, separated science and mortality. Science described in nature. Now, the impact of the Enlightenment, we got 5 things here. The secular worldview was emphasized much, much more than it had been in the past. We had the enlightened despotism, especially in Eastern Europe, where absolutism had not taken place, but those leaders in Eastern Europe wanted to have advancements like the West. American and French Revolution got a lot of ideas from the Enlightenment. We had educational reforms and the growth of laissez-faire, and which then turned into capitalism. All right, remember, history's no mystery. Take good notes.